The morning sun hadn't yet touched the mansion when a scream tore through the halls. Moments later, the wealthy white wife of a powerful businessman stormed into the kitchen. Her fury aimed at the quiet, black maid polishing silverware. In her hand, a pair of scissors glinted. "Let's see how proud you are when that hair is gone," she spat. But before anyone could stop her, something happened that froze every witness in place, even her husband. By nightfall, the story of that morning would spread beyond the mansion gates. What started as a cruel act of humiliation would unravel a truth so powerful, so haunting, that it would change every life in that house forever. The house on Ridgeview Hill had always been a symbol of wealth and perfection. White walls gleamed, marble floors shone like mirrors, and every inch of the place whispered luxury. But beneath the glitter, resentment brewed quietly, unseen, unspoken, but ready to explode. Caroline Whitmore was known across the city as a woman of elegance, grace, and control. Married to Jonathan Whitmore, a real estate tycoon, she lived the life many envied. But lately, the perfect surface of her marriage had begun to crack. Jonathan's attention was elsewhere. Distant phone calls, late nights, and quiet smiles that weren't for her anymore. And in her lonely suspicion, Caroline began to notice the maid, a young black woman named Althea. She was graceful, calm, and carried herself with quiet confidence. Her hair, thick, natural, and beautiful, became a silent target of Caroline's envy. Althea had worked in the Whitmore mansion for 3 years. She was soft-spoken, kind, and never complained, even when treated coldly. To her, this job meant survival. She was saving every dollar for her daughter's college tuition, holding on to dignity even when dignity wasn't returned. Then one afternoon, Caroline overheard laughter, her husband's laughter, echoing from the kitchen. She froze when she saw Althea smiling politely while serving him tea. That single image planted a seed of jealousy so deep it turned poisonous overnight. By dawn, Caroline's obsession had consumed her. She convinced herself that Althea's very presence, her beauty, her composure, was an insult. And when she entered that kitchen with scissors in hand, she didn't see a human being. She saw a rival she wanted to destroy. What she didn't know was that Althea had a secret, one that would soon bring the entire house of Whitmore to its knees. The incident began quietly. The house was still, except for the clinking of dishes and the low hum of the morning news. Althea was arranging breakfast when Caroline entered. The tension was immediate, thick, sharp, suffocating. Caroline's eyes darted to Althea's hair, a perfect halo of soft curls. Her lips trembled with fury. Without warning, she grabbed a handful of Althea's hair and raised the scissors. The sound of metal slicing air filled the room. But then, Jonathan's voice thundered from the doorway. "Caroline!" The scissors clattered to the floor. Althea stood frozen, one hand trembling near her head. Caroline, breathing heavily, turned toward her husband. But instead of defending her, Jonathan's expression was pure disbelief. "What have you done?" he whispered. Caroline's excuses tumbled out, twisted words about betrayal, loyalty, and appearances. She accused Althea of things unsaid, of moments imagined. But as she ranted, Althea simply stood still, silent, dignified, and unbroken. Jonathan stepped forward, his tone cold. "You owe this woman an apology." But Caroline refused. Her pride wouldn't allow it. Instead, she stormed out, leaving Althea shaken but composed. That afternoon, Jonathan asked Althea to take the rest of the day off. She refused politely. "I'll finish my work, sir," she said softly. And so she did, until evening, when an unexpected visitor arrived. A sleek car pulled into the driveway. Out stepped a woman in an expensive suit, poised, confident, carrying a leather folder. She introduced herself as Ms. Grant, a lawyer. "Good evening, Mr. Whitmore," she said. "I'm here regarding Ms. Althea Carter." Caroline appeared in the doorway, confused. "Her? What could she possibly need a lawyer for?" The lawyer smiled faintly. "It's about her inheritance." The room fell silent. "Inheritance?" Jonathan repeated. Yes, Ms. Carter is the rightful heir to the Carter family trust, established by her late grandfather, Reverend James Carter, one of the earliest black business pioneers in this state. She's been living modestly, avoiding attention, but her assets were recently transferred. She owns multiple properties, including one right next to your downtown headquarters. Carolyn's face drained of color. Althea stood quietly, her eyes lowered. She hadn't meant for anyone to know. Jonathan looked stunned. Why didn't you say anything? Because, Althea said gently. People treat you differently when they know what you have. I wanted to be valued for what I do, not what I own. That night, Jonathan couldn't sleep. For the first time, he questioned the kind of house he had built, one where status mattered more than humanity. The next morning, Caroline didn't come down for breakfast. The house was silent, heavy with guilt and shame. Jonathan called Althea into his study. She hesitated but entered, her head high. He stood by the window, his voice low. You didn't deserve any of this. I don't know how to make it right. Althea shook her head. You can't undo what's done, sir, but you can make sure it never happens again. Later that day, Caroline descended the staircase, pale, tired, and humbled. She found Althea cleaning the same kitchen where it had all started. For a moment, she just watched. The same woman she'd tried to humiliate, now standing stronger than ever. Caroline's lips trembled. I was wrong. Her voice broke. I thought taking your pride would make me feel powerful, but I see now I was the one without it. Althea said nothing. Instead, she extended a calm, steady look. One that wasn't filled with hate, only quiet forgiveness. Word spread about what had happened. A week later, Jonathan announced a new initiative through his company, scholarships and hiring programs in East partnership with the Carter Foundation. Althea's name appeared in the papers, not as a maid, but as a philanthropist. Caroline avoided the spotlight. Her once perfect reputation cracked. Yet, she started volunteering at one of the community centers Althea funded. The woman who once tried to destroy someone's dignity was now learning what dignity truly meant. Months passed. The mansion changed, not in color, but in spirit. Gone were the quiet hostilities, the whispered superiority. What remained was a kind of peace that came only after truth had burned. Everything falls away. Althea continued her work, not as a maid, but as the director of a foundation that bore her family name. She never mentioned the incident again. To her, forgiveness was not weakness, it was liberation. Jonathan became one of her strongest allies, helping fund community programs for underprivileged youth. But it was Caroline's transformation that shocked everyone most. She began organizing drives for single mothers, often standing beside Althea during public events. Their uneasy friendship became a symbol, not of wealth or race, but of growth. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the city skyline, Althea stood on the mansion's porch, the same one she'd once entered as a servant. She looked out at the quiet streets and whispered a prayer of gratitude. Life had tested her patience, her pride, and her purpose. But she had risen, not in revenge, but in grace. The world often tries to define people by their color, their job, or their place in society. But as this story proved, true strength comes from the heart. And sometimes, it takes one cruel act to reveal just how powerful compassion can be. Because in the end, it wasn't Caroline's wealth that made her important, nor Althea's inheritance that made her worthy. It was the courage to stay kind in a world that often isn't. And that's something money or prejudice will never buy.